someone.
Yeah.
Did you say something?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a lag. I'm feeling it. But there you are now. You're fine.
Ah, okay.
We'll just take it slow, see what we can do.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure.
Um, so I want to talk about governance today. What does governance look like to you today? Because it's looks very different for me than it did even a year ago. So I want to understand what API governance means to you.
I think at the heart of it, the concept of API governance still remains the same to me. Um, because coming from an engineering and product background, I probably might have a different take on this. I think before the AI era and currently where we are in this bubble, I think the intent is still to put our focus on quality, governance, standards, and inbuilt into every phase of the API lifecycle. I think where the shift has happened is with this massive explosion of tools. I think rather than relying on heavy centralized governance processes, kind of have your governance copilot with you right now.
I like
So
that.
that's where I'd say shift is happening.
Yeah. So is this just engineers? Is it product managers? Is it everybody with their copilot next to them?
So I think that's where I'm seeing change. And this comes down to API maturity levels in different organizations, organizations wanting to invest in tooling, and organizations having different uh, cross-functional teams getting involved in API governance. So to your point, yes, I think my recent experience in few different places has been between startups, mid to large. And so I can see that product and design teams feel left out, and they've always been left out. It's nothing new. That hasn't changed. But I think this AI era has helped them actually realize that they can get involved. Um, so I'd say it's rather cross-functional, and at least I'm seeing that shift where design wants to get involved because pretty much today tools are still caught up in the
Work.
I think we lost each other. I don't know how much of it you got.
No, I think you ended at there's still a lot of fight around tools, and that was like the last thing I heard or something. So
So I think that's where I'm seeing the shift because I think from what I spoke to you a few years ago, I think the fundamental problem remains where API as a product has never been the focus. And so product and design feel that they are not across what developers do. And I think developers feel that they know the developer experience much better than their product and design counterparts. And so I think that's where today the tooling has helped product and design folks to actually get involved much earlier. And I can tell you from my experience as well, it's now just not in the build or design phase. It starts right from your business case and your PRDs. And I can see that's beginning to shift. So whether that's tooling, so if you're lucky if you've got all the access to all the different tools, but I can see teams are starting to use agents to do their spec reviews, trying to actually write out the specs from an early from your PRD itself, if you're still writing PRDs. So I can see that there's a massive difference. And so you're shifting left. Governance is not like an afterthought, or governance is not something that happens automated or well understood only by developers. I think the scene is changing.
I like it. I would say that reflects what I'm seeing and why I left Postman. I went to Bloomberg and to bridge API governance, to product support, sales, get all those stakeholders involved. But I was doing it from a very centralized platform notion, which I feel like in just 2 years or 2.5 years, or no, three, that's changed. Because like, can you elaborate more? Like centralized isn't the way. You need to federate and load balance, right?
Yep. I think I'd say that there are still, depending on who you work with. So I think the fintech and the banks can still be caught up in a centralized model.
Mhm.
And so I think it's still seen, I'll put it this way, I think governance is still seen as like almost some sort of red tapeism. And I think that's the mentality and the sentiment that has to change. And so I don't think we'll get away from the centralized system, at least in certain industries. I think that'll still continue to exist because it's more of a mindset shift. That's always been a problem. And I've always been caught for using the word governance, whether it's in a centralized model or a federated model. I think that is fundamentally also wrong because I think we are starting to blur the definitions between guidance and governance. We're not there yet. If we are matured, yes, we can talk about guidance. But I think the federated model kind of changes things. So from my experience, I can see we started off with a centralized model. And so getting XX stakeholders to buy into this concept is a big challenge. They do not see value in it at all. Standards are there. I think they wait for the very last where API security comes in only once everything is done or everything goes wrong. And so I think it's very reactive, and that's when they think about there's value in looking at governance. And then comes the centralized concept because they feel that they are best placed to actually run this whole system. And I don't think that works. That's like you're in your like age old days where everything runs from one single group or one single person, and that is a big bottleneck, especially at the speed that we are all operating today. What we work on today is not the same tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a bit contradictory because when you talk about centralized model and the era that we are in, they're not hand in glove. They don't go well
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, I agree. And it's much, and I'm less with governance about like, oh, we got to clean everything up. It's about just negotiating alignment in each given moment, like week to week, quarter to quarter, different teams, different groups, and just let's negotiate the best alignment we can. And that's good enough. And let's improve and move forward. And that's all we've got time for.
Yes. And I think it's more of a mindset. The negotiation becomes tough because this is now not me pinpointing any particular stakeholder, but I think as the further you get from the problem or the further you are away, like from being hands-on, I think that's where the issue lies. And so it comes back to the same problem. It's a mindset. And so that's very hard to uh, educate, regardless of how many years you've had in the industry or whether you come from the pre-internet, post-internet, pre-cloud, pro-cloud, post-cloud era. But I must say that I should give credit. There are some stakeholders um, who are interested in the problem. So personally speaking, I think we started off with a centralized in one of my previous places. And then it collapsed because we couldn't keep up. And we had quite a few incidents. And so that's not the way to go. And so I think we had a very strong product team who said that governance should be pre-baked in. And I was part of that group. And I think we may have spoken recently as well about it. So it needs to start from the time you're defining your strategy and vision. And I must say that we still do, most places that I worked in do not have that concept of getting product people involved. And that's sometimes partially the problem because product folks do the storytelling and the why behind it. Developers and engineers are great at building the design, the elegance, and the consistency. But I think when it comes to factors like discoverability, future of where what we are building today is going to stand true or hold true in the years to come, I think that part you have to lean on the other stakeholder groups. And so I think that's partially the problem for going into this messy situation with the centralized model or even with the federated model. And I think that's what helped me because I was given the opportunity to actually try and bring about a change. It didn't come easily. It required me to actually work with various different domain teams, product and engineering, senior leads across to understand what their own standards are. It could be different. And do they have, like, what do they do exactly when it comes to linting or just ensuring that their schema definition and specs are in place. And so that's when I got to know that every team does it differently. And do we have one size fits all? No, we can't, because depending on how compliant and what are the different standards and policies that they need to comply to, it can be a mixed bag. So I think that data helped to understand that centralized model kind of doesn't work. It's also a bottleneck, but it's also something that wouldn't work for all teams in the same way. And so you've got to have this federated model, a little bit of autonomy, but you still have some sort of a model sitting right at the top where you give them the guidance, and that's where it spins a little bit. It turns into guidance coming from the top to the org as to how to go about building APIs and where to put your focus more. And then after that, you give the autonomy to each of the teams to be able to do that. Now, and it's one tier further down is where you then start thinking about the tool set. So if you ask me today, AI, the focus is a lot about tools, right? Moving from agents to MCPs to A2A and a lot of things. So they're all, I'll still call it the tools. But I think right at the top of the stack is still the mindset and the people and the process to a certain extent before you get. So the tool helps you to it amplifies it, but I think the rest of the stack still remains the same from where we were a few years ago to where we are today.
And you speak of people, a lot of the problems, the bottlenecks. I mean, I heard platform bottleneck, but I know from experience it's a people bottleneck that are centralized and often shorthanded and short resource and trying to do too much. And there's a certain amount of accountability and ownership and autonomy that teams have to have for this to work. But like you said, they got to have the guidance, they got to have the awareness. And I feel like this is all people stuff, but and I've long said engineers should know more about the business and the product side, and products should get involved in the open API and all of that. But as I move forward, I'm not always sure I'm right in some of that because I feel like some of these people just think very differently. And so do you think there's an opportunity, or do you think it's going to be new friction with the AI and agent tools kind of brokering that relationship between us?
I think it comes down to how we want to embrace the differences in the times that we are in. So definitely in the past and right now, product and engineering will never align. So to your point where you felt, is it that product don't understand the language, do engineers don't, that problem still remains, but that's a strength. And partially the problem is one segment keeping the other segment out isn't going to work. We need to embrace those differences because that's exactly where the all these problems that we've been talking about could be solved. And so then the tooling is not going to amplify the problem, but it's going to amplify the speed in which we are able to actually simplify governance. Right. So I think that's where I see all the traditional problems still being a problem. It's still going to be run because also all different roles are becoming a little bit blurry today because of AI. So tomorrow, um, I'm already doing it. I'm already have agents just going and checking the open API spec and then trying to tell me about what I'm missing. So I may not even rely on an engineer. An engineer might say the same thing. I do not need a PM to be actually writing, but I don't think that's that. The AI still needs a lot of thinking. It doesn't have a brain. It just works on what we write, the context we provide. And so I think the human in the loop is still needed. So the differences between product and engineering still needs to be resolved. There will be an overlap. There will be differences. We just need to understand how to work together. And then the tools becomes, I don't think it's a bottleneck. It's just that we need to work along, as I mentioned, with our new governance copilot. I think that's where the change would be. And so these tools can fit into different parts of the API lifecycle and the development.
And you mentioned when we first started talking, and I don't know if the video was working right, but you mentioned throwing a PRD on the table, as part of this kind of conversation, and I'm seeing that kind of spec-driven Venn diagram of these roles and people, and everyone's kind of bringing their tool to and spec to the table, and open API, you said open API, and then PRD, and then you're saying governance, which could mean different things. It could be spectral rules, it could be OPA policies. And so is this how we're going to kind of negotiate the context that's needed back and forth in real time?
I think elimination of negotiation is never going to happen. But I think the intent is we need to shift far left. I think we're somewhere still caught between the middle and governance to the right. And you're right, governance can mean different things. But I think where I feel the shift should happen and where I think PRDs come into play is it all starts with the thinking around API being a product. Right. And you do not have to be building public APIs. You do not have to be like a API company like Spotify or anybody. But I think everything is fundamentally APIs today. AI cannot exist. Behind the scenes, you need APIs. So I think every company today is going to be an API company. But I don't think people who are actually, whether they write PRDs or whether they're flat, they go just straight into building. I think there needs to be some thought put into whether they are building APIs and who they are building APIs for, who's consuming these APIs, because it's no longer systems and humans, but it's probably going to be agents and we don't know what else. So I think that education needs to happen. And I must say sometimes product folks are not confident. They always say that developer counterparts know better, but I think that's fundamentally the problem. We do know something that our engineering counterparts do not know, and engineers do know something that product folks don't know. And AI systems do not know to think. So that way, product and engineering will never have issues because we do know that each of us have our own brains. Correct. So I think there's a little bit of an evolution happening there. So the governance where you're talking at the early days where you're still figuring out what to do, whether you're writing APIs. I don't know whether it'll go to an extent where you'll get designers who are still looking at more from a UI experience. Probably they might be looking at an agentic experience. Whether they would go down to an extent of thinking about async APIs, open APIs, I do not know. But I can see that because with our PRD templates, we are able to actually help them write in, say, very plain, simple language as to what exactly do you want to get out of this outcome. So what exactly what information are you sending? What information are you getting? So I think it's spinning a little bit until they get to a point where they are comfortable understanding what these different specs and formats are, and they're not far away. And I think that's where the tools are helping. So the gap will be bridged very quickly between product design and engineering, simply because everybody's starting to think much earlier, and primarily because we've got so many LLMs and agents doing the work for us.
Yeah, I think the velocity's picking up, and we have these LLMs kind of helping us kind of, I think the wheels getting that moving. I think we've got to figure out what that coordination that, because I agree, like we've had this wall, this canyon between IT or engineering and product, IT and business. I mean, your both of ours entire career. I mean, it's been there. It's not going away. And I've spoke to closing it many times, and I've long given up on that. We need to get more refined in how we throw things back and forth over the walls and send signals back and forth. And I think the LLMs, and for me, like I can speak in the language that or through the tool that matters to them most. I can speak through Google if you need, Office 365 if you need, Notion if you need
Yeah,
Notion. So I feel like these tools that we've adopted, like I don't care what anybody uses. I got a tour of what was it? The one of the app creation ones. Dang it. I forget the name of it. Bubble, no, that's not Bubble. But anyways, I'll think of it in a little bit. But like, how do you vibe code an app? And someone who is
yeah,
very proficient at that. And I just need to get them a set of requirements around getting access to a calendar, and so I threw some open APIs at them and some agent skills, and they were able to do what they needed to do. And then I went back to work doing what I do.
exactly. So I think that's where I was talking to you about the top of the stack and the guidance. Now that's where the shift would come. At the max, you're going to give them like a whole set of YAML files. You're going to give them a few different standards to think about. I think that's where it changes from governance to guidance.
Ah, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, and thanks to AI, because everybody's starting to understand the language. But I think we need to still keep in mind that we're still early days, and it's API governance and security is not something that which we can completely leave it to our governance copilot to take care of. It's a very risky thing to do. So
Well, I have my Claude running in the background always. Yep, it's running. On crawling I bookmark articles, bookmark things, and it goes into an API queue, and then Claude looks through it for any new API references that already aren't in the API Evangelist, and then it crawls it, grabs the docs, generates an open API. But I have a whole set of schemas. I have Open API, this JSON schema for Open API 3.1 and 2 to validate that. I have a rate limit, a plans and price. I have schemas for everything that I need Claude to do, and it's validating those. And then I have skills that further shape and further structure and provide those guardrails. And I have rules.md, and my spectral rules and vacuum rules have kind of moved into that realm. And so it's kind of this nice blend of deterministic and non-deterministic. And sometimes the pendulum goes one way or the other too far, but it seems to come back to a balance, at least that works for me.
and that totally depends on how much you fed it. So by the sounds of it, you've given it a lot. But if I were to just give very basic information and limited information, I'm going to get
Yeah.
the quality back, right? So I think that's probably where um, product design, engineering, IT, business, I think those fundamentals need to be strong. And I don't think everybody's there yet to understand how context matters, how prompts work, what info should I give, how should I give that. The structure matters today. I think we've gone other days we were talking about docs, now we're talking about agents, we're talking about skills. It needs a lot of structure. So I think our skills are changing. So we've got to give us some time for all folks who haven't been close to MCPs, A2A, everything else to actually get on board and try and understand how things work. And so I think until that time, we probably might still need a human in the loop to take and not do a lot of clouding. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
What's what's your biggest frustration or friction point or challenge in just in your work in general right now in this moment?
I think getting everyone on the same page when it comes to focusing on governance. I'll still say that is a challenge because I think we're all chasing bigger deadlines. I think we want to be first now. Everybody wants to be AI first. Everybody's looking at options to rewrite everything that we wrote in the last 10 years, which is not leveraging AI at all. So I think what do they call it? The SaaS apocalypse. I think all of us are fearing the worst. So I think the focus is there. Everybody's in this bubble, fearing the worst. And so I don't think they do understand that API quality, APIs really need to be considered even more today in order to work on the vision that all these companies have out there. So I think that's the biggest challenge to actually try and figure out. Yes, it's APIs, so I think they get that. But I think we need to build APIs faster, and faster doesn't necessarily mean we are building it the right way. And getting Devin and every other AI companion to do the work isn't safe too. So I think that's the challenge today because I think senior stakeholders feel that tools can do it all. And so that's risky.
Yeah, still need that human piece. We're at six. I don't want 6 o'clock my time, but we're at the hour. Uh, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but how much of that landscape is you heard you say SaaS apocalypse and then you talk about the APIs we're building. How much is it that we've built versus what we've bought at some of the places you've worked? You know, what percentage is that balance that we have to kind of govern and bring order to?
I think it's completely imbalanced. It's skyrocketed because fundamental problem right now is, I would say, go steps back. API discoverability, because we're going to have a lot of shadow APIs. We're going to have APIs that are just going to be created, I don't know, by the day in millions. So, and we're going to have apps out in various different ecosystem marketplaces like exploding too. So, and with the SaaS apocalypse, I think everybody is going to panic and go into a mode where we're going to see an explosion of APIs. And so I think that's the fundamental problem now, if you ask me. It's API discoverability.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't govern what you can't see.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's something which I don't think we've thought about as to how we can dynamically discover APIs. There are tools out there which help you to figure out new APIs and catalog them, but I think we still have static ways of discovering APIs, and that's where the problem is.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me. It's been a focus point in my career for the entire last 16 years, and it hasn't progressed even a little bit. It actually seems to have gotten worse. So,
Yeah. So you'd probably say that it's an API evangelist. Yes, I'm sure.
One last question. What gives you hope right now? What makes you show up at work and be interested in doing API governance?
Gosh, I've been in APIs now for quite a bit, and I don't think my interest has and my passion in this field has just only increased even more now because, and I should say it's because of the times that we are in today. So, as much as I am passionate about it, I also want to ensure that I have guardrails around it, and I also want to ensure that my product and design folks are aware and help them also come along the journey. And I think that's what brings me back. There's a lot of education and learning that I get at Share. So there's a Share bank. There's stuff that I learn. There's stuff that I actually give back to the product and design community as well. And I think that's what is interesting, that they're open to learning. And so now it's a question of talking to my engineers to actually say, hey, we've got folks who are interested. And so bridging the gap and helping us to actually focus on governance early is what keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, bridging the gap, not closing the gap. Bridging the gap is, I think, the key part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've known you for a few years since I interviewed you at Postman, and you're kind of that, I don't know how to say this, like tenacious, hard-headed, pushing personality, real nice and real kind about it, but you're like pretty persistent and a little intense sometimes about, but we need that internally within enterprises. Like, I mean, I'm very public and very theatrical in what I do out in the space. We need a handful of me, but I think we need armies of people like you, like doing what you just said and spreading the word. So,
Thank you so much for saying that. And I think, and that's the main part that I would like to actually focus on, bring along. And I think there are many folks like me out there. It's just that it's just not visible, and just we need to make ourselves more confident that we can do it. And so I think that's probably what brings me back into the world of APIs.
well. I appreciate you coming talking to me. I love learning from you. It helps validate what I already know, but you kind of help ground me. And I mean, I'm not a practitioner. I'm not inside the enterprise now, so I